men, messy and smelly with camembert crotches, enough to make him renounce la vie sexuelle. Bodies commanded by leather aliens for sweet, sinister sin, erotics of humiliation, groveling, torture, flesh as weapons, depth of lust measured by how ecstatic the flinching, naked prey, new meanings of naked, the only helmet flesh, tripping, sperm-drenched, great gobs of devouring, raw honesty of rude sex with its own control system, getting to somebody, then abruptly cut off, moral panic left to the straight world of sermons and soda water. Now the last part, which is a sort of summation, and gives you an idea why I wrote the book, because it has very meditative sequences about different views of sexuality, aging, you know, that's one of the worst things for gay people, I guess, but for most people, let's be honest, aging. Okay, I know. Sex, a pilgrimage to travel out of a rut. Sex, also a translation. New rooms, new spaces with light switches to toggle, controlling what to see, the light to take or not take photographs, the depth of what we wish to keep, redemptive tactic, epitaphs to grieve our former flushes, blushes, awe and shame, bricolage of the human. He thinks himself old and dirty when facing tender young sailors, can only wish he could be their mentor, reconciled to the never-vanishing ache of unrequited yearning. On one hand, tattoo artists to gangs and their closeted sinister world. On the other, his cage, a refuge for boy men he adores, his secular religion, enshrining fascination, the urge to turn himself to a changing love that doesn't change. I said he was a tattoo artist to the Hells Angels. Skin engraver who can ink anything but his heart, wonders if his is just an artichoke, each pen name a separate leaf to strip away, leaving what at the center? A fuzzy heart, hairy choke, rough hazard? Perhaps the best of life is in the striptease, risking awe in cutting to the stem of love. And now the final three octaves. This is about aging and melancholy. Too old at 60 to be the root of roots, he becomes full boy, skinny dipping in reedy lakes, cruising bars, posing as a silver dandy, cruel lines around his eyes and light, bulging belly, lilac wilting below the belt. Wrinkle confusion does not fade, no armpits parched with secrets, as he gazes at sky, its clouds loose, his sighs sinking under sun. What is bad when it's jugularly? More than rain on the heart, devouring by its own nature naked beaches, tanned bodies on rocks, talking of outlaw desires, this man's ardor, that one's art, sharp sestinas of insistence, all connected by and. And the last one I'm going to read. He does not linger in last stanzas or final rooms, where all that's left is what we do to each other, and then we are done. Wonders if it matters what the outcome. The older, preening faces before mirrors, words and deeds lost in dark glass, best images worn away with the body's erasure, and the story's final words are not sensuous, deviate delight. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Keith.
Thank you.
Everyone knows a question is a question. I like that. We're going to take a short break. We've got some refreshments over on the side. If you want some wine, it's 7:45. Is that close enough?
Okay.
Yeah, that should be fine.
You could do the third reader read.
Or you want to take a break?
I say yes.
You say yes to a break? Okay, we'll take a break. Yeah. We'll be back in about 10 minutes. Okay, thanks everybody. Let's grab June to grab the music. Are you kidding? So just before we get started with our second half, I've got a few little housekeeping things to let everybody know about. If you want to learn more about the Single Onion, you can go to singleonion.com. We have an email list that you can sign up for, and once a month get a little reminder about our upcoming events. You can also find us on Twitter and Facebook. We want to give a big thank you to the League of Canadian Poets, the Canada Council for the Arts, the Calgary Arts Development, the Writers Guild of Alberta, and of course Shelf Life Books for hosting us here and for being so supportive of the Single Onion for so many years. I want to give a big shout out to the Single Onion crew. We've got Kirk Miles, Paul Marshall, Paul Kelly, Josephine Leray, Will Lawrence, Audrey on sound, and Laurie D. Roadhouse, all part of our Single Onion family. The next event will be here will be May 16th, and will feature Bruce Hunter, Wayman Chan, Micheline Mailer, and Laurie D. Roadhouse. And next week will be our open mic at Munch on 17th Avenue. Paul Marshall will be our host, so come on out to that and you can share some poems with everybody. I think that's all I need to say about that. Our next poet is Han Jade. Han is a bookseller and event coordinator here at Shelf Life Books. They play music in a band, write poetry, and enjoy feeding the birds. Their friend Kyle, I saw Kyle, he's walking right there, published a poem of theirs with The Blasted Tree. Blasted Tree does amazing chapbooks. Han was on the Artist in Residence Board at the Women's Center, has organized creative writing groups, and volunteered with Alcove Arts and multiple local and music film festivals. So please welcome Han Jade.
Hello. Such an honor. I've been witnessing the Single Onions happening for years now, and I've been really inspired by just the most incredible lineups. So I'm quite touched to be sharing tonight. It's special for me. I just have some poems, and I will share them. Okay, Baby Blue. When we touch, there is morning dew on blue sheet. First baby's cry can be heard in morning light, bringing life back to worn-out sheet. We made a nest in my womb, watch baby birds take their first flight from my knees, fly around the room, fly around the room. But that was spring, now is winter, and we only touch for warmth. We're all dried up. We sleep and leave, sleep and leave, sleep, leave. I hope these sheets are in incubator, and our snowfall of dead skin cells, suicidal hairs, miscellaneous crumbs, backs of earrings, and that one lonely sock create an altar. Every night, I pray at the foot of our bed, twist the rosary of blue sheet through my fingers. Every morning, I smooth the creases, fold the top. I pray then too as the sky turns black to deep, deep blue, then baby, baby blue. Next one, A Life for a Life. You were resurrected. Last night, I slept with an empty coffin. I awoke to hear you knocking. You climbed out of the dress-up chest as if we had been playing, wearing clown shoes and my dad's old blazer. You put a witch's hat on me. The chest an enchanted sandcastle I must have built while asleep. I try to touch you. Grains fall through my fingers into sandy sheets. So I scoop I scoop until my legs are buried, hips, torso, shoulders, chin, forehead too, and then I pull my arms in tight. Last night you were resurrected, and I buried myself in you. All right. Now we're moving. Now we got some poems going. Such a treat to hear Keith. I was lucky enough to lose a game of rock, paper, scissors to Sky from Frontenac, and I only got to choose one book. Usually it's more than that. And I chose yours and had such a fun time reading that. So really cool to hear it out loud. With everything, words. I pack my words into a carry-on luggage, fold them in half, turn in the edges, to fly on paper trails lasting 5 seconds. I turn on the television, face it to the window. City's hungry eyes can consume itself. I forget the words of yesterday, but I will always remember the shrill. I hail a cab, sit in the trunk, on the road leading away, turning back home. I package the edges, send me flying through time and space, between white-yellow lines, land in a tree, neighbor's yard, a fountain, out of reach. The streetlights are hitting the exhaust pipe of cab. Watching out, red tail light, crammed in the back with a letter or an invoice, a voicemail, crumpled posts of thoughts, hazy through gaslight. Or at least what we've passed. 1st and 2nd Street, the neon sign that reads sail, 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 everything's got to go. A moment passed along the road. I pay the fare, pay my taxes, pay for place, pay for pleasure, pay my time, your time, and get on the way. Ink still wet, then turn the page. I left my phone in the back. Left it sitting where I was, beep, beep, chime, chime, as the streetlights encourage shadows to spring. I could go back to lying on my back in the back of the cab, scramble to answer back, fast, fast, fast. But they drive away. The building to my right says, neon sail, everything must go. Next little poem. I love a clap. I love a clap. Send sun. Sky, send the sun. Feeling rather weak. Play tired pretend, stranger yet to meet. Sun send someone, burning belly spleen. Wrist bent, withstand, tongue I can't compete. Someone went wrong. A stream runs way up. Feeling rather strong in my disappearance. Wrong, said the sun. You haven't left your bed in days. Have a look in your face. Why dissuade a sunstroke someone who can't make you play? Why dissuade a dull way when you're out of practice? Duck who saw a cat first. Danger is a safe way. I got some more. You got some more? Window. The wind through the window smells sweet, thick, with life. I want to buy a fan, to blow the smoke out, holding me in vacant arms, out. Sitting in a square of my own breath, pacing footprints marked in ash, I sweep every day, get it out, get it out. Everything here reflects me. The furniture is so still. I try to be the walls, I try to be the desk, dresser, but no one is around to fill me, to use me, to need me. Garbage piles, and the mirror is empty. I live through the window. Tonight it is quiet, but smells so sweet. Carpet. Not very creative with titles. Carpet. Carpet thoughts creep. The wind sends me treats. Twirling maple twig, a sprig, a leaf. The powder crush leaves me dust. To seance visions of figure hidden. Intuitive sort, green leaf me, calm breathing, looped meaning. A needle in the arm. I am the ocean, the clouds, the air, rain. All I feel is water. The seashore suits the ill, suits me ill, replenish while watching from above. Since I was a child, compulsively possessed, I submerged every body of water. When I was 8, twirled from maple tree into 14 feet waves, I thought I was dead. On the carpet, sun ripples, sand coffin purple, purple fingers, lips, limbs, I love to succumb. The silo stalk speaks of carpet thought creeps. Thanks! I've only got 2 more poems. That's all right? All right, excellent. Okay, Fool Branch. Young dawn, apple branch in my arm, ivy leaf cheek. I hung as the fool for 5 times 9 days. Do I dangle sweet? In the wind or hiss death toll breath, bells ringing in a silent, vibrant forest. Keeping the dogs away. You are lapping at my feet with the first drawn candle in the coldest day of the week. How did I never know water taught us to speak? Do I dangle sweet, twist apple out of reach, or am I as still as the moths laying eggs in my arm? Or am I merely a pillar for an autumn cause alarm? You seem to lean and whisper all your pain, hoping my bark will bite the taste of tyranny out of your moldy, musty heart. For I am the king, and you have fallen far. Awesome. I have the tiniest little poem to finish it up, and that's it. Yeah. If you bet a waterfall, do not imagine to be swept. The force is a cannon, shot down in wet lock. I soak the insipid spiral of your flowing water drop. The force is heavy, all to swim away. I prefer to drown in overwhelm than sit upon a rock. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you, David. Thank you all.
Thanks so much, Anne. Our final poet this evening is Ian Kinney. Ian is the author of one book of poetry, Air Salt, a trauma memoir as a result of the fall, which we have here, from the U of C Press in 2019. Ian serves as a radical mental health doula and works as a caretaker, occasionally farmhand and gardener. This bisexual settler poet lives with traumatic brain and spinal cord injury in Calgary on Treaty 7 land, but he also occasionally cares for their parents' self-sustaining homestead and free-range farm on the traditional Kainai territory between Vulcan and Lethbridge. Ian's work has been shortlisted for the Robert Crouch Award for Innovative Poetry, so please welcome Ian Kinney.
How's everyone doing? Positive? Wonderful. So, back in 2007, I started a creative writing project called Deadlines. And in Deadlines, I sought to rewrite the newspaper to document the zombie apocalypse. Using only sentences and phrases that I found in my local newspaper, the Calgary Herald, I unwrote a series of horror stories. And in 2020, during the COVID-19 pandemic, I dug up my experiment. And I brought the monsters and Deadlines back to life. But in so doing, the writing mutated into various volatile poetic fragments. So content warning, the following deals with virulent infection and violent assault. But it's okay. It's just a story. Or is it poetry? It's not over. Fears rise. Violence and death continue to hammer provinces, cities, and towns, unprecedented. The vast majority of us have received the prescribed amount of vaccine to hold the virus at bay, and yet there's so much more going on, and it has been for the last several years, prompting him to repeatedly strike them with a hammer. The incident is not believed to be random, police said. Case counts rise. An unprecedented increase in complaints about street safety, the duration of the pandemic, the duration of the nesting period for patients in pursuit of monsters. He and his friend were chased by a gunman through the streets. A man implored the others to keep their heads down. Domestic abuse calls rise. Our government have emerged from a period of unprecedented military intervention. Fatal shooting victims fear shots during a pursuit. Zeta surge raises alarm. All cases in the outbreak are thought to have been acquired in hospital. Before they returned, they did not talk to them in any shape or form. If he had just talked to them, then we could have settled this down. Evacuees keep Zeta at bay. This is a hammer, he said. Unprecedented deaths soar through the worst pandemic disaster. Department officials investigate the handling of what can be seen stomping on the victim's head before striking them with what appears to be a hammer. The best that they could find was that he only battered the victim once. You can debate whether it's a medium or a large-size hammer, but it's definitely a hammer. A hammer people need. Why can't we just do this forever? Today, we are truly near the end of this thing, the Premier said. The health minister encourages people to discuss the safety of vaccines with family and friends to quell concerns and to stop the spread of misinformation. The library has also been cancelled. This is a hammer, he said. It's pretty unprecedented in the province that the pandemic is this widespread. The Premier said Friday that the infected do not appear to be moving at an alarming rate at the moment. He said the business had to remove some items and to sanitize the area where the group was spotted. The health minister encourages people to report signs of infection immediately. As her body lay prone on the floor of their kitchen, he went to his garage to retrieve a .22 caliber rifle and finished her off with a bullet to the head. Overall, the province has administered 3,384,026 doses of vaccine so far. How many waves are we going to have? The murderer met one of the hosts armed with a knife, a box cutter, and cloves of garlic. The latter items, he told witnesses, were to ward off the undead. It's a hammer the municipalities need. The poetry community now asks itself just how widespread is the condition of plagiarism. Zeta variant now resistant to bullets, more resistant to bullets than other strains. The health minister encourages people to stop trying to go into the city. Viral cases rise, but officials believe in a solution. With a lengthy list of missing loved ones in and around the city, many families anxiously await word from the Missing Persons Unit. We are in a horrific pandemic. It is in record time, in the apartment, in and around the city, in this country's history in less than a month. In recent months, in the area, in the province, and across the country, the pandemic is in the province, in Indigenous-led activities. It is in our homes, in several pounds of impacted snow. The pandemic is in China, in Russia, in the United States, in addition to others. The pandemic is in the room flexing their debating skills. The pandemic set off fireworks in your backyard last night. It is in the city and beyond. In colonialism, in several places, what was described as an infestation. The pandemic is in the kitchen, or in the washroom, or in filth. The pandemic is in the National Journal of Sciences. It is in the root size and raw force of the infected. The tooth size and raw force of the infected. The pandemic is in a series of attacks on racialized citizens. The pandemic is in the city and beyond. It is in their teeth, which grow larger and wider upon infection. The pandemic is in the city's downtown on Friday. The pandemic is in an alley behind your home, in churches and in synagogues. The pandemic is in the province, in the burial grounds, in 1997, in 1937, in 1941, in 2019. In the woods, about 7 miles from the school, in the country, in the province. The pandemic is in the United States, in some ways a shared fight for communities of color. The pandemic occurred in recent months in the wake of the discovery of the bodies in its headlines, in a totalitarian state, in applying paint to the periphery. The pandemic is in the public state, is in the public interest to proceed, but in a way it is not surprising. The pandemic is in a potentially record-breaking high in the restaurant industry in particular. The pandemic is in the hospitality industry, in our kitchens and arms. They're next to you, in the foxhole. Reaching out more to colleagues present and past throughout the pandemic is in suicide prevention, in stigma, in terms of affecting people's mental health. The pandemic is in the province, in the city, in the deaths as well as in heart illnesses. The pandemic in between our shelters accesses our drinking water. The pandemic is in someone's house, in a text message. The pandemic is in critical life-threatening condition. The pandemic is in the newest installment of the franchise. The pandemic is in human areas and in the national park. In a news release Friday, the pandemic is in critical condition. In 24 hours on Monday afternoon, the pandemic is in the warning statement. In trouble, in uncharted territory, in other tools, in almost exactly a year. The pandemic has been in place for almost 15 months. The pandemic is in the province, in the presence of the highly infectious variant of concern. In order for life to return to normal, the pandemic is in an email in October. The pandemic is in the grip of extremes. The pandemic is in the city, and they're not going away anytime soon. In rural areas and in contempt of court, the pandemic is in the city's downtown, and it's not following court orders. In between the pillar and the lamppost, the pandemic is in my hand, and I threw it in his direction, in the crosswalk in the city in March. And if we do not work together, casket makers and dirt will benefit most. Cases soar. Restrictions introduced. As the infected descend on the city, the province's top doctors impose new restrictions on the region. Infections in the city rapidly climb. In light of the explosive outbreak, the city is poised to announce a new strategy aimed to shield itself against the wave of attacks and unleash an army to manage the infected. The situation is ongoing. More to come. We don't talk about those who can no longer talk. We don't talk about those who have not the breath to speak of their pain and more. We don't talk about those who, exhausted, left the convo to curl in under a steep heap of leaves rotted in the corner of the yard. Some sang hymns. Raid police adapt to work amid the virus pandemic. City police were called to the block to reports that a vehicle struck a crowd joined in unison, chants of struggling, proactive, good faith, and marked increase. The crowd joined in unison, chants of motivated by hate, get out, and Nazis out. The crowd joined in unison, chants of a very large part of our history, lateral thinkers, and vaccinated. The crowd joined in unison for chants of the ultimate thrill and this is it and the bodies are buried. The crowd joined in unison, chants of, it's a lot of pain to go through, cut off, and he wasn't moving. Protesters also carried placards reading, no compulsory vaccination. We will not tolerate censorship. The police chief said officers did not try to stop the damage to the crowd, which was done by a small number of 1,000 or more cars in the crowded highway. It sounded like a freight train, reports one officer. It sounded like popcorn. Everyone got hysterical. It was like a war zone. Others described the event as horrifying and, quote, complete mayhem. Dozens of police officers monitored the crowd as some sang hymns. Don't shoot us in the head. More from the Calgary Herald. They don't affect the economy. They don't feel bullied into it. They don't quite work anymore. They don't have anything to hide. They don't have to feel different. They don't have very many people. They don't keep anyone from breaking through or falling through a window. They don't provide the information. They don't have to say the word. They don't actually seek help. They simply don't. They told us that they felt depressed, undervalued, lonely, and isolated, and they don't feel that they necessarily have control over their lives. They don't quite work anymore. They don't feel like they have to hide. They don't have anything to hide. They feel that there's social stigma and discrimination against them. They don't have enough supports. They don't care about themselves because they said it unburdens them. This is one thing that they do not need. My mental health isn't getting installed until Sunday. I just did the dishes for the first time in 2 weeks. My mental health isn't helping. I can remember them cutting off my brand new coat and my jeans to get to the wounds. My mental health isn't very subtle. This isn't a replacement for professional support. My mental health isn't bad. It's just hard for you. Citizens deserve change every day. My mental health is such a huge part of maintaining strong mental health. My mental health isn't great. I didn't imagine that we'd still be in training. I became exposed and susceptible to brainwashing and mind control. My mental health hasn't done that before. My mental health and my inability, my powerlessness. I work in a dilapidated acute mental health unit made out of ATCO trailers, where I continue my creative writing practice. My mental health isn't my master. I stick to routine, go to sleep, and wake up to reassemble time at a reasonable time. My mental health is underlying, and it happens whenever a man comes through. If I laughed a little, would it be okay? Tell me your mental health isn't great without saying my mental health isn't great. I'll start. More death and injury due to the pandemic. Extremely extreme. Variant pushes risk of critical injuries to uncharted, some would say unprecedented, levels. 2,000 more deaths were reported Tuesday, bringing the province's daily death toll from the virus to 2,921. Regional health authorities and national armed forces continue to issue warnings. The latest variant poses serious risk to public health and safety. Those affected by the latest variant got fatally shot in a hail of bullets yesterday, and yet the depleted and burnt-out workforce persists, and yet these attacks continue to happen. There are currently outbreaks or alerts at 413 schools across the province, representing 17% of the province's total schools. New restrictions were introduced by provincial health authorities Monday as case counts multiply, spurred by the most contagious mass suicide in local history. Emergency crews battled the third wave of the pandemic as reports of serious injuries continue to wreak havoc and cost thousands more lives. One survivor of a school outbreak managed to escape the avalanche of bodies and was extricated down to an emergency shelter. But one witness said that she had already succumbed to her injuries. Police were unable to provide an update on the survivor's condition. The capital fast approaches more active cases than at any time since the pandemic began, with the province now racking up new virus cases every 15 seconds, the majority of them the highly infectious and more deadly variants. The wave of infections crashes into our Anglosphere cousins in the United States and the United Kingdom, both of whom well outpace the country in violent crime rate at a time of a particularly high death tolls. Another wave is expected to hit the capital by mid-afternoon Thursday, and emergency officials expect that the day will continue to be focused on fighting the infected. Aside from emergency crews, no one is allowed to return to the city, leaving the animals to fend for themselves. There are more than 2,000 active variant cases in the city zone alone, with the majority being the Z117 variant that was first identified in the United Kingdom. As the capital city begins to stir back to life on Wednesday, the country cut its confirmed death toll from 3,082 to 3,041. As hundreds of the infected began to walk, the streets were again clogged with traffic and vendors working the sidewalks after authorities lifted a 5-day shutdown to try to contain the outbreak. The night that they got sick. The worst is over, for some of us. Despite the curfew and vows by authorities to crack down on what they call the swarming mass of infections, crowds continue to gather at buildings and chant at riot police, "Walk with us, walk with us, I can't breathe, send more police." Police in riot helmets, far fewer than on previous nights, recoil in horror as demonstrators invade the capital. Immediately after curfew, hospital and ambulance services were overrun as thousands of chanting and screaming patients began to march. These protesters currently dominate the food chain. Everything possible will be done to bring our valiant soldiers home alive. Police said protesters disobeyed instructions that they gave to help ensure people's safety, including refusing to wear face masks and observe social distancing guidelines. We're heading into our peak season for virus infection, specialists say, as police helicopters whir overhead. The peak should have hit in early May, with over 1 million infections and deaths, yet as the global outbreak of the virus unfolds, we begin to hear the moans of those buried under systemic violence. Health Services has confirmed that a genuine wartime psychology has taken over. For now, the enemy seems far more dangerous than ever. Everyone with a runny cough or a runny nose is still considered a risk to public health and safety. Physicians simply don't know what's coming next, but the province's top doctor has made it clear the government wants the infected deported as a national security risk. The government has made the reasonable decision to declare anyone infected with the virus a terrorist. How am I for time? Riots turn deadly. Smoke billows from the capital and gunfire rings through the streets as riots break out across the country. The reaction to the riots was immediate, the largest evacuation in state history. Virus-related deaths have risen exponentially as reports of domestic violence and domestic violence-related deaths spike worldwide. We are going through something that's unprecedented at this point. It's something that is really unprecedented. We have not dealt with something like this magnitude before, says the police chief. Riot police are out in force as lawmakers debate another piece of legislation, a bill to criminalize the Z word in the press. But the message from authorities is clear. The pandemic has exacerbated existing problems to an unprecedented rate. This is the death knell. Make no mistake, this is the end. Recent mob violence follows confirmation of a virus case in the region, but the government said later in the day that it believes the cause or the unrest was caused by a failed prison break and not related to the epidemic. The Prime Minister has asked nearby states to send in 50 strike teams, each with 5 engines. The Prime Minister also expects more planes from national forces to arrive over the next few days. With hundreds of thousands of people fleeing the homes, weary emergency responders struggle to slow the relentless mob that has consumed well over 108,000 citizens since the weekend. There's been a mass exodus. All roads are gridlocked. Emotions are on edge. The truth hits like a sledgehammer. The markets will reopen once there is enough uninfected employees to run it safely. Meanwhile, the rest of us are the walking dead. We must further English the language. The virus is in English. And if you can read this, then the virus is in English, and if you can read this, and then language and friends, and the virus is in English, and if you can read this, then. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Ian. And thank you to all our readers and performers this evening. That was really fantastic. Keith and Courtney and Han and Ian. Thanks to everybody for coming out for our events. Thanks. Thanks to the folks joining us online. And thanks to Shelf Life for being our host. So we'll be back next week at Munch on 17th will be our open mic. And then back in May here will be our next single ending event. And I think that's it for me. So thanks, everybody.